kindly help me welcome on stage Ash Molu.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Final morning of ABC. In true fashion, we're only an hour behind schedule. So I like to get the show on the road. I want to welcome to the stage Desiree and Pierre, and also welcome back Oken to the stage. Thank you. Ooh. Seat's still warm. Thanks, Lamar.
Hello.
If you just want to turn those mics on. All right. Yeah, so this panel is about telling the story of financial revolution through film, and I'm really excited to host this panel. My name is Arsh. I work at the Human Rights Foundation. I just want to do a quick, brief intros for the panel.
First of all, thank you, ABC, for having me and having all of us. I think this is a conversation that doesn't get had a lot. I'm Desiree. I'm Puerto Rican, filmmaker, storyteller. I am head of marketing of Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol. I have a background in science, which that scientific preparation and that curiosity has led me down the rabbit hole of what I do today. I got orange pilled working on a film with one of my most beloved friends, Alana Menavia, called Dirty Coin, and that was the big adventure to see how Bitcoin and energy innovation can really impact the world. It was incredible. And yeah, my big mission is to basically unite these technical, complex stories together with the human potential.
Sure. So I'm Pierre Corbin. In 2021, I quit my corporate job because I wanted to work in Bitcoin. And the first thing I decided to make was a documentary. It's called The Great Reset and the Rise of Bitcoin. It's got over 2 million views on YouTube. And from there, I created the Bitcoin Film Fest. In fact, we were supposed to have a different representative for the Bitcoin Film Fest here from the region that couldn't make it. So, yep, they asked me to come on stage. And but the point of the Bitcoin Film Fest is to show films that are Bitcoin topics or Bitcoin adjacent, so very freedom focused. We did 2 editions so far. It happens in Poland, Warsaw, and the third one is in May 24 to 25. So I, welcome all of you to join. In my filmmaking journey, my film, of course, I released it on YouTube. It's open on there, and I was censored for 2 months. My film wasn't discoverable on YouTube. The ad revenue that I got from YouTube was blocked for about 4 months. And this kind of got me a bit obsessed about self-custody, other payment solutions that are more peer-to-peer for business. And so I also founded a company called Flash that does Bitcoin payments.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm Oken. Thank you again for having me on the stage for another time. I'll give a bit of a different part of who I am. So before Bitcoin, I got my MBA in China, but generally I'm a writer. Initially, I've been a poet since I was 14 years old. I've been on different anthologies around the world, and also I was the first African podcaster to be paid in Bitcoin. Streamed Bitcoin while people were listening to my podcast. So, thank you. So for me, it's a different journey than the education of Bitcoin. It's always been a use case for me. And I believe in the storytelling aspects of how people come around to things rather than just, throwing facts at them.
Yeah, I mean, the three of you work on really interesting stuff. I think the common denominator is storytelling, right? So how, with all of your work in Bitcoin, in storytelling, how has that shaped the perspective of Bitcoin through film, through writing? And how does it have the potential to shape the perspective of others?
Wow, yeah. Well, getting to work first on a film and then, other projects as well, you start to see that Bitcoin really is just the beginning, right? There are so many more aspects to it, including the internet and our identities, how we're going to live out our digital lives. And it just like gives me goosebumps. It's just one, when we say revolution, it clearly is a revolution for humankind, right? So getting to travel around and collect stories and start weaving together this understanding, this global understanding of what's going on, the big picture, is very powerful, I believe.
For me, the power of storytelling around Bitcoin, I remember trying to get my mother and family members on this like why Bitcoin thing, and there was, I just can't remember the name of the movie now, but there was a documentary of a student in he's a filmmaker and student from the U.S. who literally was sitting, I think somewhere in L.A. He had his class there, and he was in Africa, and he was in South Africa somewhere in Joburg, and he had connected a Bitcoin wallet, on-chain wallet, to the actual electricity, like what's it called? You purchase power, like pay-as-you-go power, and he connected it in a way that while the people were sitting in the classroom in the US and the teachers were sitting in the dark in Joburg, he had them make a Bitcoin payment, and you saw the lights go on, right? Like 15 minutes later. And that in itself, just the story of how that came to be, was where my mother was like, okay, let's talk about this now. So the power of storytelling really isn't just about the story you're telling, but for those that are listening or watching, and how they now come to a realization of like, wow, this is something different than I thought it was from the narrative I've been given the whole time. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I was always a fan of cinema. It's always something I really liked, even though that's really not what I was working in. It's just something I had a lot of passion for. I always liked, making travel videos and the like. And, when I really started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole is when I, just like every Bitcoiner, felt like I had a story to tell, right? Everyone needs to listen to this. And, I just had too much time after quitting my job, as I said. So I thought, okay, let's just put these stories down on paper and just get into editing, because I think I enjoy the process. Just geeking out on my computer is something that I enjoy. I'm also a programmer, so that's obviously something you have to enjoy. Very quickly, especially when you make a documentary that resonates with people, you start realizing that, okay, maybe the past 9 months I spent working every day on my film actually is worth something, because even people that have worked all their life in finance would just come to me, tell me, look, Pierre, I've never seen a film that like explains the financial system as well as that, and that gives the context of Bitcoin and really gets them into the Bitcoin space. I think that's, it's very powerful, of course, very flattering for myself, definitely, but it shows the impact that storytelling can have. And I think it can scale very quickly. And there's different ways of storytelling, right? There's, of course, you can write things, there's podcasts, there's shorter video format. I personally like long format. Because if you get them hooked in the first 5-10 minutes, well, then you get them to sit and watch for an hour and a half your film, and you get to like push your entire story and narrative and tell other stories, and get other people's words out as well.
Yeah, and you never know when that piece, right, someone really needs to see inspires like a whole other thing that they never had thought about before, which is just like the most incredible thing to see people's faces every time when, we've done screenings, and it's just like those aha moments, like, wow, I didn't know Bitcoin could do that. That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, so keeping it with you, Desiree, what's an example of a story that you've had the opportunity to display, whether that's through film or whether that's through a podcast or writing?
Yeah, I want to say Gridless was my big aha moment, getting to help with the interviews on that with Janet, who was incredible. She explained it so well. I was just blown away. That, and I have done some other work that will come out later on in the future, especially with the Human Rights Foundation on the human rights side, and it's more the broader perspective of like where this is going, right? Like I said, Bitcoin is so much more than we can even imagine. It's becoming a world.
Yeah, same question to you, Oak, and here.
I think You know, storytelling has this way. Africans are mostly oral, like our way from history of transferring knowledge is storytelling, right? So I really do think that for us, it's so entrenched in who we are and how we communicate and how we pass on knowledge that storytelling, podcasting, let me give you as an example, is like literally a digital version of sitting around a fire and telling people a story. How that story is conveyed, though, is different than how it's perceived, right, by most people. I can tell something in one way, but how you're perceiving that is a totally different thing. So I think when it comes to storytelling from this aspect, it's more of a way of saying, how, like, for me it was, how do I tell the story without me telling the story? How do I tell the story so that you feel like your uncle's telling you, your cousin's telling you, your brother's telling you, your sister's telling you? And that for me in podcasting was to bring people on that also are storytellers in their own right, whether they're designers, whether they're, you know, writers, whether they're musicians, and in that way extract a story that somebody else can relate to, but not that I'm orating. And I think that gives another value to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm working on a second documentary. It's called The Fight for the US Dollar. It's been already 2 years now, so you know, we'll see when that gets released. But I did already 40 hours of interviews for it, and you know, I'm French and Spanish, but grew up with a French education. I interviewed Farida for it, and we wanted to talk really about. I mean, I wanted to talk really about the CFA, Frank, and you know, in France, people don't know like what's up with the CFA, Frank. And for me, that was, you know, I mean, of course, I already had done a bunch of research before talking to her, but having this conversation was just, yeah, big revelation. And because in France, people, you know, they think, well, we did good, we do good in the region, and like it's, I mean, I find it crazy. And instantly after that interview, I sent it to all of my friends. Like, you gotta watch this, guys, because like it's crazy. Like, and stop saying, yeah, but you know, like we helped in development, and without us, like they'd like just kill each other. Like literally, that's the kind of stuff I heard, right? And so it's, yeah, you know, these kind of stories that I think. Are important to be able to share to a greater scale, and also, generally speaking, being able to explain the struggles that some people have had or the lack of opportunity some may have. I mean, I interviewed Roman Martinez. He's from Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, and his story is before Bitcoin came into El Zonte, your opportunity in life really depended on what side of the street you were born. If you were born towards the ocean, you'd be a fisherman. If it was the other side, you were going to be a farmer. There was no other option. And I think, you know, these are the kind of things that are important to show, to tell, and other people can tell this so much better than we can. That's the point of, you know, doing all these interviews and trying to put this into these nice stories that will bring all these emotions to people so they can relate to them and understand why, you know, change is needed, because that's what we're here for.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess communication, right? We all have different perspectives and different ways of seeing the world and talking about it. And as storytellers, it is a big responsibility to figure that out and to, yeah, create understanding, right? So,
And Pierre, you mentioned the story with Farida, who actually had a big hand in bringing us all together here today and telling our own stories. What role do you think Africa can play in storytelling, and how can we empower the people in the audience to tell their own stories? Like, personally, I've been so inspired by hearing and talking to people, hearing about their stories from all around the continent.
Yeah, well, so it's my first time in Africa, actually. And I've been to a bunch of Bitcoin conferences, so it's also my first Bitcoin conference in Africa. And there's a completely different story being told. Like, it's so much more about how to use Bitcoin as opposed to how can I buy as much Bitcoin as possible and try and get rich as quickly as I can. Like, we get a lot of this, right? In Europe or in the US, that's kind of always the big topics that work the best, that has the more people in the audience. Whereas here, it's really more about how can we use it. Like, it's really solving a problem day to day, not just a get rich quick scheme. And I think that's an important story. I think that's the story that everyone needs to hear, because this is really, what we're working for, right? It's everyone should use the, non-custodial peer-to-peer payment solutions. Anything other than that is just not good enough. And it just, empowers a lot of people. Now, when it comes to being able to do something, I'm a pretty good example. I never did film, and then I just decided to make an hour and 20-minute film, right? Like, anyone can do it. It's work, yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of hustle. I'm not saying it's easy. The first film, I completely self-financed myself, so that makes it, in a sense, easier, I guess. The second film, of course, much more ambitious. Money is needed. That's an entire problem in and of itself. You need to chase people down. There's no money to be made in filmmaking, especially documentary filmmaking is very difficult. So you just get a lot of rejection. That's the hard part of it. And even when you get a success, you get a sponsor that doesn't follow through and doesn't pay. And all of a sudden you've got your script writer that is waiting on his $4,000 payment for now 6 months, right? And it's just, the good thing is, we're all very passionate here, and we all just care about the story, putting the film out there. It's not about the money, but unfortunately, money is needed to make films as well.
Yeah, that's how you know the story is worth being told, right? When you constantly, it might not always be rewarding. There's oftentimes funding issues with that, right? Oken, as someone who currently lives on the continent, right? I guess what's your opinion here? How can we get more Africans to tell their own stories? And if someone in the audience wants to start creating content, if they want to start writing, shooting a podcast, shooting films, what's something that they can do to get involved?
Great question. So I'd say everybody has a story to tell, as we all know, right? Everybody has a story to tell. And I think it's about trying to create a platform for people to be able to tell that story. Like when I did my podcast, it wasn't to tell my story. It was so that other people could tell their stories. But that podcast was created during COVID. I already had the material and none of us could go out. But I knew a lot of creatives around the world, within Africa, outside Africa. So it became a thing of, let's create a podcast where, and I didn't at the point in time know how to do any of that, right? I didn't know how to do video editing. I didn't know how to do audio editing. Yes, I was a musician. I go in, I record, I leave. I don't do any of the back end stuff. But once I put up the podcast, and I was like, okay, let me call this person up. And then it was like, let's show the world the conversations creatives have when there's no cameras around. I need you to feel comfortable and tell your story. What this allowed was for people to see, hey, there's more than just what I thought about this person or about this industry. And that's what we really need here, is to allow people to expose the rest of us, not to what we think the story is, but to what the story actually is, told by the person living the story. So I'd say that the biggest challenge is trying to not center everything around yourself, actually allowing other people to shine in their stories, and then realizing that by doing that, we not only get to spread our stories as Africans further, but we get to reinforce those stories. We get to be able to, again, sit around a digital campfire and be like, oh, well, this actually resonates with me because this is what happened in my life, without being interrupted. No, we don't want to hear that. We've heard it already. Next person, type of thing. And in the form of a podcast, I'd say, again, I didn't know how to use command line before 2019. Before COVID hit, I didn't know how to do any of the recordings, but the resources are everywhere. Literally, YouTube, you can learn how to audio edit, video edit. So whatever you're thinking in your mind of how do I get my story and the story of my people or the people I know need the story told, jump in. Just literally the same way with Bitcoin, rabbit hole it. Dive off, there's no way back up, and just figure out how to grab onto a wall or something around you. And in that, you start realizing you're not falling. You're almost gliding down, to a place of safety. And the more you work around telling other people's stories, you realize that your story isn't insignificant. It adds to a greater story.
Yeah, and it's been said before, but if we don't tell our stories, someone else will, right? And I'm from Puerto Rico. I have deep African roots myself. However, we also have a problem of electrification. And what's inspired me to work in this industry is Gridless. It's Africans telling their stories, right? So we need more of that. And I think it's a global effort. So don't forget that, fragmentation is by design. So don't forget to unite and collaborate with the people who really want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking in the audience, just briefly, right? I'm seeing people who have just recently started with what they're doing, and it's already made such a huge impact. For me personally, and I'm sure many other people as well. We have a couple more minutes left. I just want to close it out. If you guys have anything else to add in your remarks, but also maybe a call to action, right? Like, how can people get involved in what you're doing personally?
Yeah, so to say this isn't something I just do alone, and neither is for them. We do need support, and their support comes in many ways, right? And even a job, right? But we have this gift to do it, and we want to continue doing it. So, yeah, it takes a village, and my colleague just showed me Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot. If you have a chance, please go ahead and read it. It's very inspiring. It gives you more of a sense of unity. Like, on this planet, we're all gonna die. We're all gonna, like, how many, what was it, like, kings and queens and blood spilt out in the rivers. And it's this tiny little thing in space, right? So let's work together to make some kind of sense out of it.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the best things that comes out of being a creative in this space is, as you just said, like, you're not alone. There are others that you can lean on. There are others you can learn from. And just in general, like, jump off the cliff, right? You're already at the top. You can see what's happening. Jump off the cliff, right? And see what happens. Because, like, a lot of people are fearful. They're like, okay, I have this idea. Like, I think it's going to be great. But maybe their best friend was like, that's rubbish. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to give up. Like, just jump off the cliff, literally, and see if it works. Because either you're going to enjoy the journey, learn something from the journey, or you're going to regret not taking the journey, watching somebody else take the journey you wanted to take. And then they're prospering, and you're like, I could have also done that, but you didn't. You decided not to jump off the cliff. And that's, as a creative, as somebody that makes something that was in your mind become something real, you need to have the conviction to say, I'm okay to fail. Be okay to fail, because I've always said this, there's no such thing as a real loss when it comes to, like, creating. It's about learning how not to do something. Like, I learned that's not the way to do that. I learned by doing it, though, So I think that's really what I would say is collaborate, but don't be afraid to, like, take a chance on yourself.
Yeah, and I think, you're not alone, that's for sure, but also there's a real audience in the Bitcoin space. I mean, when I made my film, I was hoping for like 50,000 views on YouTube, right? And like it went up to 2 million, which was crazy. There's a real audience out there. I mean, I think we know as Bitcoiners, like, we just absorb content. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do. And even when it comes to just being involved, getting involved in Bitcoin film in particular, there's many different ways of doing that. I mean, of course, if you have, a bunch of money, you can finance different projects out there. Everyone is always looking for money. It's very hard to make films. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Many people need to be involved. But even if you have just a few sats, there's so many projects that are on Geyser, the crowdfunding platform. I even myself have a project there. And there's a lot of films there that are looking for funding, help from the community. But it goes even beyond that. With the Bitcoin Film Fest, we have, of course, a Telegram group. It's called the Bitcoin Cinema Chat. And, you can just check the bitcoinfilmfest.com website also to be redirected to it. On that chat, there's always filmmakers that are looking for help, that are looking for stories, that are traveling to certain places. They, maybe looking for locals that can help them either get access to stories, get access to equipment, whatever it is. So there's a lot that can be done. And if you just want to get an idea of what this is like, come also to the Bitcoin Film Fest in May 24th, 25th. I think that's where you can meet the community.
Just to add to that, for those of you in the room that are like, but all of the stories that people like want to know has been told already, they haven't. I remember sitting down beginning of this year with Femi, and Femi was like, he looked at me and he's like, somebody has to write the Bitcoin standard from an African standpoint. Like, who's going to write that? who's going to write the next big Bitcoin? Like, we have Broken Money by Lynn Alden, but who's writing the African version of Broken Money from an African standpoint of why it's broken for us, different for why it's broken for other people? Like, there are so many stories to still write and tell. Each one of you in this audience could be another book that somebody picks up and is like, I get it now. Because they might not get it from another standpoint. So just wanted to end off with that.
Yeah, and shout out to Charlene as well, who wrote the
Whoop,
Bitcoin
whoop.
Lead.
Yeah, she's been a super inspirational storyteller for myself, and I'm sure for many, many more. Yeah, I want to add the work that you guys are doing at Bitcoin Film Fest is incredible. They've given me a platform to really grow and put myself out there with my film partner. So, and if you guys have a chance to go to the next Bitcoin Film Fest, do it. It's just so incredible. We actually got to celebrate on the halving. We partied, and then Dirty Coin was.
Yeah, I think it was the biggest halving
premiered.
party in the world. Yeah. Just
Oh my God, you guys
everyone
are doing
2
great work.
a.m. drunk, looking at the block clock and waiting for it, and just hugging, happy halving, happy halving. Yeah.
should-
Unfortunately, no halving next year though.
We should have a Bitcoin Film Fest here in Africa for sure.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I agree with that one.
I like the idea.
I've met some incredible storytellers, and every time, I mean, I came here last year, and I'm just always still blown away by everyone here. So,
Well, I'll just end by saying, if anyone wants to get into the realm of what these folks are working on and tell your story, come find the panelists. This is the last day of the conference. Come engage, get involved, and with that, let's get a round of applause for the panel.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
There's one last item, kindly. We are very big on card games today. So I'd like the moderator to take this card and ask the panelists one last question on this card.
Okay, don't mind if I do. Okay, so we have a question. The question is, who's most likely to start a podcast or a blog and abandon it after 2 months? It's who's most likely to start a podcast or blog and abandon it after 2 months?
Out of the three of us or other people?
Just in general, right? Both. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's very difficult because especially something like a podcast. If I think of me and the films that I make, it's much more passive. Like I can kind of do it when I want. So like there's whereas a podcast is something you need to stick to. Like you really have to do it like every week, like once a week, twice a week. I don't know. It depends on the format you have. Of course, it can be once a month, but you need this consistency, and that's I think. Yeah, that's the hard part. I myself tried starting a podcast and I didn't stick to it because it's just tough. But
Okay, now we have the answer.
I think as creatives, we like to fail fast. So we'll try many mediums, right, to keep moving forward, and sometimes some things just don't work, right? I remember one time I went ahead and recorded something, and I couldn't even listen. I was like, oh no more. But that's to go back to what you were saying, you just got to keep doing it, and even if you feel like you failed, you're gonna pick something up that's gonna create that spark, right? So even if I'm sure we've all had our fair shares of projects that are still on the back burner, but yeah, that's part of the process.
You guys are spicy. They want you to name drop.
Basically, I'm least likely to be the one, right?
No, you got proof of work.
I have a little bit of experience in it. So I'd say from the three of us, who's most likely? It's Pierre, bro. He just said it himself.
That's true. No, but if I can give one advice though, especially if you're you're thinking 2 months ahead, just contact a bunch of people, schedule podcasts for the next 3 months.
That's it.
It's in your calendar. You have no choice.
Yeah.
You'll do it, and you're certain you do more than 2 months then.
Well, there you have it. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that.